I never thought I'd be standing at my daughter's college graduation ceremony, watching my ex-husband's wife realize I was her new chief executive officer. The color drained from Natasha's face when the university president announced me as the commencement speaker, Dr. Eleanor Morgan, newly appointed CEO of Pinnacle Innovations. After years of her snide comments about my little research job, while she flaunted her corporate success, the tables had finally turned. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Eleanor Morgan, and for 15 years I believed I was in an equal partnership with my husband James. We met during our postgraduate studies at MIT, where I was completing my PhD in biochemistry while he pursued his MBA. We were young, ambitious, and madly in love, two brilliant minds with dreams of changing the world together. James was charismatic and driven, with a talent for networking and business development. I was more methodical, passionate about scientific discovery and innovation. We complemented each other perfectly, or so I thought. When we married after graduation, we agreed to build our careers together, supporting each other's ambitions equally. I landed a promising research position at Meridian Pharmaceuticals, focusing on breakthrough treatments for autoimmune diseases. James joined a venture capital firm specializing in biotech investments. Our plan was to eventually combine our expertise, my scientific knowledge and his business acumen, to launch our own biotech company. That dream was put on hold when I became pregnant with our daughter, Sophie. The pregnancy was difficult, with complications that required me to reduce my workload. James was supportive, assuring me that my health and our baby came first. "Your research can wait," he said. "We have our whole lives ahead of us." After Sophie was born, I planned to return to my research full-time within 6 months. But James had just received a significant promotion that required extensive travel. "It would make more sense for you to work part-time for now," he suggested, "just until Sophie's a little older and I'm more established in this position." His reasoning seemed logical. His income was higher, his career trajectory steeper. I agreed to scale back my hours, taking on a senior research role with flexible scheduling. I told myself it was temporary, a strategic decision for our family's future. By the time our son, Ethan, arrived 3 years later, the temporary arrangement had calcified into permanence. James was now an investment director, bringing home substantial bonuses. We moved from our modest starter home to a spacious house, in an exclusive neighborhood with a state-of-the-art home office where I could work remotely when needed. "You have the best of both worlds," James would say. "A prestigious research position and time with the children. Most women would envy your situation." Perhaps they would. I still conducted meaningful research, published in respected journals, and contributed to important pharmaceutical developments. But I was operating at half my capacity, watching colleagues with less talent but more availability surpass me professionally. The first clear sign that James and I had different visions for our partnership came when Sophie started elementary school. I proposed returning to full-time research and pursuing a leadership position that had opened in my department. "Why would you want that stress?" James asked, genuinely perplexed. "We don't need the money, and the kids still need you around, for school activities and homework." "It's not about money," I explained. "It's about fulfilling my potential, making the scientific contributions I know I'm capable of." James nodded thoughtfully. "I understand ambition, Ellie, but there are seasons in life. Right now, the children need stability at home while I'm building something that will benefit all of us in the long run." He made it sound so reasonable, so loving. And perhaps it was, from his perspective. But what about my season? When would it arrive? As the years passed, I maintained my research position, but watched my career advancement stagnate. Meanwhile, James rose to partner status at his firm. Our home became a showcase for entertaining his colleagues and clients. I played the perfect hostess, smiling as James introduced me. My wife, Dr. Morgan, brilliant scientist who chose family over fame. I'm the lucky one who gets to benefit from her intelligence over dinner conversations. These introductions gradually shifted from pride to patronizing. My PhD and research became character notes in his personal story, rather than achievements in their own right. "Mom?" 12-year-old Sophie asked one evening after a particularly lavish dinner party. "Why does Dad always talk about your work like it's a hobby? Isn't developing new medicines important?" I brushed her hair back from her forehead, careful, to keep my voice neutral. "Your father is proud in his way. He just sees the world through a different lens than I do." The breaking point came during a family vacation in Aspen when the children were teenagers. While James was on a conference call, Sophie borrowed his laptop to check her school emails. That's when she stumbled upon extensive correspondence between James and Natasha Reynolds, his firm's new marketing director. The romantic exchanges were devastating enough, but what truly gutted me were James's descriptions of me. "Eleanor lives in a bubble of test tubes and theoretical outcomes. Natasha, you understand the real world, market forces, timing, execution. You see the big picture the way I do." That night, after the children were asleep, I confronted him. "Is that how you see me? As someone disconnected from reality?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. James didn't bother denying the affair. Instead, he sighed as if I'd finally acknowledged something obvious. "We've grown apart, Ellie. You're brilliant in your narrow field, but Natasha operates on a broader canvas. She thinks strategically, sees opportunities beyond the microscope." "I wanted broader opportunities," I said quietly. "You consistently steered me away from them." His expression hardened. "That's unfair. I supported your work while prioritizing our family's needs. If you'd truly wanted more responsibility, you would have fought for it." In that moment, I realized the profound imbalance in our relationship. While I had compromised career advancement, for our family's sake, James had simply pursued his ambitions unimpeded, reframing my sacrifices as personal choices or limitations. The divorce was swift and clinical, much like a failed laboratory experiment. James had prepared meticulously, with prenuptial clauses I'd barely noticed when signing 20 years earlier. While I retained our family home and received child support for Ethan, Sophie was nearly 18, the financial disparity was stark. James moved into a luxury downtown condominium with Natasha, who was 15 years younger than me, and rose quickly to chief marketing officer at Helix Bioventures. Ironically, a competitor to my employer, Meridian Pharmaceuticals. I found myself, at 45 with a research position that had plateaued, two teenagers navigating the emotional fallout of divorce, and the crushing realization that I'd allowed my scientific potential to be systematically diminished year after year. The woman in the mirror looked like a stranger, someone whose fire had been slowly extinguished under the guise of family compromise. Her lab coat, once a symbol of ambition and discovery, now seemed like a uniform of acquiescence. "You need to reclaim your scientific voice," said my colleague, Dr. Vivian Chen, over coffee in the hospital cafeteria 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Vivian and I had been postdoctoral researchers together, but while I had scaled back, she had become Meridian's director of immunology research. "The science never stopped mattering to you, Eleanor. Your insights on the RX-437 project were brilliant, even working part-time. Imagine what you could accomplish fully engaged." Her words simultaneously comforted and terrified me. The thought of stepping fully back into the competitive world of pharmaceutical research after years of partial engagement made my stomach clench, but a spark of the old ambition flickered to life. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table after the children had gone to bed. staring at Meridian's internal job board. There was an opening for research director in the autoimmune division. Exactly. The kind of role I would have pursued if I hadn't scaled back when Sophie was born. My finger hovered over the application button. The negative voice in my head, which sounded suspiciously like James, listed all the reasons I shouldn't apply. The demanding hours, the competitive candidates, my rusty leadership skills. Then I remembered Sophie's face when she'd found those emails and her quiet question later. "Mom, did you give up your dreams for us?" The pain in her eyes wasn't just about her father's betrayal, but about the possibility that I had diminished myself unnecessarily. I clicked apply before I could reconsider. The first interview was brutal. The panel consisted of executives who had once been my peers but had long since surpassed me in the corporate hierarchy. Their questions probed the gap in my leadership experience, the years of part-time status. While maintaining my research contributions, I was developing other skills, I explained, forcing confidence into my voice. Managing complex family logistics, mediating conflicts, optimizing limited-time resources, all transferable to research, leadership. Some nodded appreciatively, others seemed skeptical. I left feeling simultaneously empowered for having tried and certain I wouldn't advance to the next round. To my surprise, I did. And then to the next, and the final interview with the chief scientific officer herself. Dr. Lydia Rodriguez studied me over her rimless glasses. "Your technical qualifications are impeccable, Eleanor. Your publication record is solid despite your reduced hours. But this role requires bold decision-making and strategic vision. After years of deliberately limiting your professional footprint, do you have that capacity?" Her question cut to the heart of my self-doubt. Did I still have the scientific courage I'd possessed as a young researcher? Or had years of compromise dulled that edge? "The limitations on my schedule were deliberate," I replied carefully. "The limitations on my thinking never were. I've continued to follow every advancement in our field, submitted 3 patents last year alone, and maintained a research network that spans 4 continents. I've been preparing for this opportunity even when it seemed out of reach." Dr. Rodriguez's expression remained neutral, but something shifted in her eyes. "The RX-437 protocol, that was your design, wasn't it? Even though you weren't leading the project?" "Yes," I acknowledged. "I developed the alternative binding mechanism when the primary approach failed. That protocol is now entering phase 3 trials with extremely promising results," she noted. "That kind of innovative thinking is exactly what the autoimmune division needs." 2 days later, I was offered the position of research director, with a salary that doubled my previous compensation. When I told the children about my promotion, their reactions were telling. Ethan, at 15, was practically matter-of-fact. "Obviously they promoted you, Mom. You're like the smartest person in that whole building." Sophie, home from her first year of college, had tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. You're finally getting the recognition you deserve." The first challenge came swiftly. My new role required regular presentations to Meridian's executive, team, and board of directors. I would need to translate complex scientific processes into compelling business cases, precisely the skill James had claimed I lacked. The night before my first major presentation, my phone pinged with a text from James. "Heard about your promotion. Congratulations. Surprised you wanted that kind of pressure, but I wish you well." His message carried the same undermining subtext that had characterized our later years together. The implication that I was somehow unsuited for professional intensity, that my natural habitat was the quiet lab rather than the boardroom. I didn't respond. Instead, I returned to preparing my presentation, determining that my results would speak for themselves. The boardroom was intimidating, 20 executives in tailored suits, most with business rather than scientific backgrounds. As I connected my laptop to the projector, I noticed James's friend Victor Blackwell among them, a major investor who had attended our dinner parties over the years. He nodded with surprise. Dr. Morgan, didn't expect to see you leading this presentation. Life is full of surprises, Victor, I replied evenly, before launching into my presentation on Meridian's autoimmune research pipeline. I had anticipated technical questions, budget concerns, perhaps skepticism about timelines. What I hadn't expected was to feel completely in my element. The years of explaining complex concepts to distracted children had honed my communication skills. My experience, stretching limited research hours, had made me ruthlessly efficient with methodologies. By the presentation's end, even the most finance-focused executives were engaged, asking thoughtful questions about our competitive advantage and potential applications. Impressive command of both the science and the market implications, Dr. Morgan, remarked Meridian's CEO afterward. Your division's projects just became much more visible to this board. That visibility brought both opportunity and scrutiny. Over the next 2 years, I rebuilt the autoimmune division, recruiting talented researchers, streamlining protocols, and accelerating our most promising projects. Our success attracted attention throughout Meridian and across the pharmaceutical industry. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding myself as well, rediscovering the ambitious scientist who had been submerged beneath years of compromise. I enrolled in an executive leadership program at Harvard Business School, determined to acquire the strategic skills I'd need for further advancement. The program was intense, especially while maintaining my director position and supporting Ethan through his final years of high school. Many nights I worked until dawn, fueled by coffee and the determination to prove, perhaps mainly to myself, that I was capable of excellence on all fronts. Ironically, as my professional stature grew, I encountered James and Natasha more frequently at industry events. Helix Bioventures and Meridian Pharmaceuticals often competed for the same partnerships and investment capital. At one pharmaceutical conference in Boston, I found myself sharing an elevator with Natasha, now firmly established as Helix's CMO. She wore a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, her dark hair styled in a sleek bob that emphasized her youth. Eleanor, she acknowledged with a thin smile. Congratulations on the lupus treatment breakthrough. Though I heard Meridian's still struggling to scale production? Her question deliberately touched on a sensitive issue. We were indeed having manufacturing challenges that had been leaked to competitors. We're implementing innovative solutions, I replied calmly. Sometimes breakthrough science requires breakthrough manufacturing approaches. She examined her manicure. James always said you were more comfortable with theory than execution. I guess some things don't change. The elevator doors opened before I could respond, which was probably fortunate. The encounter left me seething, not just at her condescension, but at how it echoed James's dismissive assessment of my capabilities. That night in my hotel room, I channeled my anger into finalizing my capstone project for the Harvard program, a comprehensive analysis of how pharmaceutical companies could better integrate scientific innovation with manufacturing scalability. The very issue Natasha had weaponized against me became the foundation for my highest-rated academic project since my doctoral dissertation. When the program director suggested I submit an expanded version to the Harvard Business Review, I initially hesitated. Publishing in scientific journals was familiar territory, but a business publication felt like entering James's domain. Then I remembered James's words from our last argument. If you truly wanted more responsibility, you would have fought for it. I submitted the article. 3 months later, Bridging the Innovation Execution Gap in Pharmaceutical Development was HBR's cover story, alongside my professional headshot and biography, highlighting both my scientific credentials and business acumen. The publication coincided with Sophie's graduation from Princeton with a degree in molecular biology. She had followed in my scientific footsteps despite, or perhaps because of, witnessing my professional renaissance. Your article is assigned reading in my biotech enterprise class, she told me proudly during our pre-graduation dinner. My professor doesn't know you're my mom. She just keeps saying it's the most lucid explanation of the science-business interface she's ever read. The evening was perfect until James and Natasha joined us. Though we had maintained civil relations for the children's sake, this was the first significant family event where we would all be present for an extended period. James had aged well, silver threading his dark hair in a distinguished pattern. He greeted me with practiced cordiality before introducing Natasha to Sophie's roommates. "My wife is the Chief Marketing Officer at Helix Bioventures," he explained. "She's revolutionizing how biotech companies position breakthrough treatments." Throughout dinner, Natasha dominated the conversation with stories of Helix's successes and her integral role in them. I noticed Sophie growing increasingly tense as Natasha repeatedly referenced "your father and I" when discussing their luxury lifestyle. The Aspen ski chalet, the Mediterranean yacht excursions, the private aviation membership. When the conversation turned to careers, one of Sophie's professors mentioned my recent HBR article. "Your mother is making quite a name for herself," he remarked to Sophie. "That publication has the entire industry talking." Natasha's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Eleanor has always been dedicated to her research. It's admirable to maintain such focus on a specialized area." The condescension was subtle, but unmistakable, the implication that I was still just a scientist with a narrow perspective, regardless of my business publication. "Mom's research division has the highest productivity metrics at Meridian," Sophie countered, a protective edge in her voice. "And she just completed the executive program at Harvard Business School while running it." James looked genuinely surprised. "Harvard Business? You never mentioned that, Ellie." "You never asked," I replied simply. Later that evening, as we walked back to our respective hotels, Sophie linked her arm through mine. "I'm sorry about Natasha. She always has to one-up everyone." "It doesn't matter," I assured her, though the evening's subtle jabs had stung. "Tomorrow is about celebrating you, not navigating old dynamics." What I didn't tell Sophie was that the next day would bring news that would transform those dynamics entirely. Earlier that week, I had received a call from a prominent executive search firm. Pinnacle Innovations, one of the world's leading biotechnology companies, was seeking a new chief executive officer. "Your combination of scientific excellence and strategic vision is exactly what Pinnacle's board is looking for," the recruiter had explained. "Your HBR article caught their attention, and your track record at Meridian confirmed their interest." The interview process had been intense but exhilarating. 6 rounds with board members, executives, and scientific advisors. I had drawn on everything I'd learned, both from my research career and my recent business education. When the board chair called with the offer, the compensation package was staggering, 5 times my Meridian salary, with stock options potentially worth millions. But what meant more was the opportunity to lead a company at the forefront of genetic medicine, the very field I had been passionate about since graduate school. I had accepted the position but requested a delayed announcement. There was something important I wanted to experience first, without the distraction of major career news: Sophie's graduation ceremony. The morning of commencement dawned clear and bright. I helped Sophie into her regalia, adjusting her honor cords with proud fingers. "You know what's amazing?" she said, meeting my eyes in the mirror. "Watching you rebuild your career showed me that it's never too late to claim your place. That's worth more than any advice you could have given me." Her words touched me deeply. The difficult years, the professional rebuilding, the late nights studying, all of it had modeled resilience for my daughter in a way mere words never could have. At the ceremony, I sat with Ethan in Princeton's magnificent courtyard, watching as hundreds of graduates filed into their seats. James and Natasha arrived just before the procession began. Natasha impeccably dressed in a designer ensemble that stood out among the more casual family attire. After the graduates were seated, the university president approached the podium for opening remarks. Before we begin conferring degrees, I'd like to acknowledge some distinguished guests joining us today. This was standard procedure, recognizing major donors, trustees, and notable alumni in attendance. I hadn't expected to be mentioned. We're particularly honored to welcome Dr. Eleanor Morgan, Princeton alumna and newly appointed Chief Executive Officer of Pinnacle Innovations, who will be delivering our commencement address following the AI conferral of degrees. A murmur rippled through the crowd. From my peripheral vision, I saw James's head snap toward me, his expression stunned. Beside him, Natasha had gone completely still, her face frozen in disbelief. I maintained my composure, acknowledging the introduction with a modest nod. This moment wasn't about vindicating myself in their eyes. It was about honoring Sophie's achievement and the hundreds of other graduates completing this milestone. Yet I couldn't deny the quiet satisfaction of having my professional achievement announced so publicly, especially after years of having it minimized by the very people now looking at me with shock. After the degrees were conferred, I approached the podium for my address. Looking out at the sea of graduates, I spotted Sophie's beaming face. Behind her sat James and Natasha, still visibly processing this unexpected development. Transformation rarely follows a straight line, I began. As scientists, we understand that the most significant breakthroughs often come after periods of apparent failure, when we're forced to reimagine our approach entirely. As I spoke about resilience, innovation, and the courage to redefine success on one's own terms, I noticed Natasha leaning toward James, whispering urgently. The realization was clearly sinking in. The woman she had repeatedly dismissed as having a little research job was now CEO of Pinnacle Innovations, Helix, BioVenture's largest competitor and a company 10 times its size. More importantly, Pinnacle had recently announced a review of all its strategic partnerships, including its marketing agreements with firms like Helix. As CEO, I would ultimately approve those decisions. After the ceremony, families gathered on the lawn for photographs and congratulations. I embraced Sophie, whispering how proud I was of her achievements. Ethan stood tall beside us, already planning his own university applications with newfound appreciation for academic excellence. Eventually, James approached with Natasha trailing slightly behind him, an unusual positioning for a woman who typically commanded every room. "Congratulations, Sophie," James said warmly, hugging our daughter. Then he turned to me with genuine admiration in his eyes. "And congratulations to you, Ellie. Pinnacle CEO. That's extraordinary." "Thank you," I replied. Simply. Natasha extended her hand professionally, her usual confidence noticeably dimmed. "Congratulations, Eleanor. What a surprise. I had no idea you were considering such a significant role." Her carefully chosen words revealed volumes. The woman who had partnered with my husband while he undermined my ambitions was now grappling with my unexpected ascendance. "Life continually evolves, doesn't it?" I responded pleasantly. "I'm looking forward to reviewing all of Pinnacle's strategic relationships in the coming months. Perhaps our companies will have opportunities to collaborate." The subtle reminder of our new professional dynamic hung in the air between us. For years, Natasha had viewed me through James's dismissive lens, as a capable but limited scientist who had chosen family over real achievement. That perspective had shattered irrevocably. As we posed for a somewhat awkward family photo, Sophie whispered, "Mom, you're my hero. Not just for the CEO thing, but for showing me what resilience really means." In that moment, standing beside my brilliant daughter on her graduation day, I felt no desire for revenge or vindication. The greatest triumph wasn't seeing Natasha's shocked face or even securing the prestigious position. It was showing my children that it's never too late to reclaim your potential. The reception following Sophie's graduation ceremony was a surreal experience. As I navigated through clusters of proud families and excited graduates, I found myself at the center of unexpected attention. Faculty members who had previously shown only passing interest in my career now approached eagerly to discuss potential collaborations with Pinnacle. Parents of Sophie's classmates, upon learning of my new position, suddenly remembered our brief interactions at freshman orientation 3 years earlier. "Dr. Morgan, what an honor to reconnect," said one father, who I vaguely recalled dismissing me at a parents' weekend event after learning I was just a research director. I've always followed Pinnacle's groundbreaking work in genomic therapeutics. I maintained gracious professionalism throughout these interactions, but couldn't help noticing Natasha watching from across the reception hall, her champagne glass clutched a bit too tightly. The woman who had built her identity around corporate status and connection to my ex-husband was visibly recalibrating her understanding of our relative positions. As the celebration continued, I found a quiet moment with Sophie away from the crowd. She had changed out of her graduation gown into a simple blue dress that highlighted her eyes. My eyes, everyone had always said. "You should have told me about Pinnacle," she chided gently. "I would have kept your secret." I smoothed a strand of hair behind her ear, a maternal gesture she still permitted on special occasions. "I wanted today to be entirely about you, sweetheart. Your achievement deserved the spotlight." She smiled knowingly. "Well, the timing worked out perfectly anyway. Did you see Natasha's face during the announcement? I thought she might choke on her program." "Sophie," I admonished lightly, though I couldn't entirely suppress my smile. "This isn't about getting even with anyone." "Isn't it?" she challenged. "Even a little bit? After all those dinners where she talked down to you about understanding the bigger picture of pharmaceutical business while you just sat there taking it?" The memory of those uncomfortable evenings, Natasha holding court at holiday gatherings or the children's birthday celebrations, James beaming beside her as she expounded on corporate strategy while I was relegated to discussions about work-life balance, still stung more than I cared to admit. "Success is its own vindication," I said finally. "I didn't pursue this position to prove anything to your father or Natasha. I did it because it's the culmination of everything I've worked toward professionally." Sophie studied me with her scientist's eyes, analytical and perceptive. "You know what's wonderful, Mom? I believe you. That's the difference between you and them. Your ambition isn't about status or winning, it's about contribution." Her insight touched me deeply. At 22, Sophie understood something about integrity that James, despite his business acumen, had never grasped. Our moment was interrupted by James himself, approaching with an expression I recognized from our marriage, the calculated charm he deployed when recalibrating his position. "There's my brilliant daughter and her equally brilliant mother," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be noticed by those nearby. "The scientific powerhouses of the family." Sophie gave him a measured smile. "Thanks, Dad." James turned to me, lowering his voice. "Ellie, I was hoping we might speak privately for a moment. There's something I'd like to discuss before you leave for New York." The old Eleanor might have immediately accommodated this request, rearranging her plans to suit James's convenience. But that woman had been gradually transformed through years of reclaiming her power, one decision at a time. "I'm afraid my schedule is quite tight," I replied pleasantly. "I'm having dinner with Sophie and Ethan tonight, then flying directly to San Francisco tomorrow for meetings with Pinnacle's board." James blinked, momentarily thrown by my unavailability. "Of course, you must be incredibly busy. Perhaps we could schedule a call next week? It's regarding a potential opportunity between Helix and Pinnacle that I think would benefit both companies." And there it was, the real purpose behind his sudden desire to connect. Not to congratulate me or acknowledge my achievement, but to leverage our former relationship for business advantage. Pinnacle has a formal process for evaluating strategic partnerships, I explained. Our business development team would be happy to review any proposal from Helix. You can have your team contact my chief of staff after the formal announcement of my appointment next week. His smile faltered slightly at being directed to normal channels rather than granted special access. Of course. It's just that given our history and understanding of each other's thinking, I thought a preliminary conversation might— Dad, Sophie interrupted, her tone gentle but firm. Mom just told you she's having dinner with us tonight. This isn't the time for business discussions. James looked between us, apparently recognizing a united front he hadn't anticipated. You're absolutely right, Sophie. Family comes first. Today. We'll connect professionally another time, Ellie. As he rejoined Natasha across the room, I noticed her questioning expression as he shook his head slightly. Whatever strategy they had planned for approaching me had clearly hit its first obstacle. Sophie squeezed my hand. He still doesn't get it, does he? He thinks your new position is just another chess piece in his business game. Old habits die hard, I replied, feeling a strange mixture of pity and liberation. But that's no longer our concern. That evening, dining with Sophie and Ethan at a charming restaurant near campus, I experienced a profound sense of completion. Not just because of my professional advancement or Sophie's graduation, but because I recognized how fully we had all evolved beyond the painful fracturing of our family. Ethan, at 17, had grown into a thoughtful young man with his father's charisma, but none of his calculation. Sophie had emerged from the divorce with heightened emotional intelligence and clarity about the kind of partner she would eventually choose. And I had transformed from a woman who had accommodated herself into near invisibility to one who fully occupied her power. So, Ethan asked between bites of pasta, when do you officially start as CEO? And more importantly, do you get a company car? Because if you do, and you don't need your Volvo anymore. I laughed, grateful for his levity. I start in 3 weeks, and no, I'm keeping my car. But nice try. Sophie twirled her wine glass thoughtfully. What's your first priority when you take over? Pinnacle has so many promising projects. The key question was sophisticated, reflecting her own scientific understanding. Rather than offering a simplified answer, I engaged with her as the emerging colleague she was becoming. Alignment between scientific innovation and commercial strategy, I explained. Pinnacle has brilliant researchers and savvy business teams, but they've operated too independently. My background positions me to bridge that gap. Like you wrote in your HBR article, Sophie nodded. Integration rather than sequential handoffs. Exactly. The days of scientists developing treatments in isolation and then throwing them over the wall to commercial teams are over. The most successful biotech companies create dialogue between these functions from the earliest stages. Ethan looked between us with amused exasperation. And this is where I remind you both that I'm the family's humanities representative. Can we discuss something other than pharmaceutical strategy for 5 minutes? We obliged him, shifting to discussions of his upcoming senior year and college applications. Yet even in this lighter conversation, I recognized how my professional resurrection had subtly influenced both children. They spoke of their futures with certainty that they could evolve and adapt throughout their careers, that early choices wouldn't permanently define them. The next morning, as I prepared to board my flight to San Francisco, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unexpected source. Natasha. I briefly considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. Out. Eleanor? She began without preamble, her voice professionally modulated. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I'm about to board a flight, I replied. Is there something urgent I can help you with? She paused, and I could almost visualize her recalibrating her approach. I wanted to extend personal congratulations on your appointment. It's an extraordinary achievement. Thank you, Natasha. I kept my tone neutral, waiting for the actual purpose of her call. I also thought we might discuss the existing relationship between Helix and Pinnacle. As you may know, we handle significant portions of Pinnacle's oncology marketing in European markets. And there it was, the same approach James had attempted, now coming directly from Natasha. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who had Partnered with my husband while he undermined my career, Ambitions was now seeking to leverage our connection for business advantage. As I mentioned to James yesterday, Pinnacle has established processes for reviewing all strategic partnerships. I explained. Our business development team will be conducting a comprehensive assessment in the coming months. Of course, she replied smoothly. I completely understand protocol. I just thought given our personal connection, we might have an informal conversation about Helix's value proposition, perhaps over lunch when you're back in Boston. The old Eleanor might have agreed, uncomfortable with asserting boundaries that could be perceived as petty or vindictive. But years of rebuilding my professional identity had taught me the importance of clear lines between personal history and business decisions. I appreciate the invitation, Natasha, but I'll need to decline. It would be inappropriate for me to discuss Pinnacle's partnership strategies outside formal channels, particularly given our personal history. I'm sure you understand the importance of avoiding even the appearance of impropriety. The silence that followed conveyed more than words could have. When Natasha finally spoke, her tone had lost its polished veneer. I've always respected your scientific contributions, Eleanor, but this corporate politics side of you is unexpected. I couldn't help but smile at the irony. It's not politics, Natasha. It's professional ethics, something I've always valued in every role I've held. After ending the call, I boarded my flight with a strange sense of closure. The conversation represented the final shift in a power dynamic that had been slowly rebalancing since the day I'd clicked apply on that research director position. The 3 weeks between Sophie's graduation and my official start at Pinnacle passed in a whirlwind of preparation. I transitioned my responsibilities at Meridian, worked with Pinnacle's board on communication strategy, and helped Ethan prepare for a summer science program at MIT. Throughout this period, I received numerous messages from former colleagues, industry contacts, and even long-lost friends who had seen the press release announcing my appointment. Most were genuinely congratulatory. Some were transparently opportunistic, including 3 separate LinkedIn messages from James's business associates, subtly probing for insider information about Pinnacle's partnership strategies. The day before I officially stepped into the CEO role, I received an unexpected email from my former graduate advisor, Dr. Helen Martinez, now in her 70s and retired from active research. Eleanor, she wrote, I just read about your appointment to Pinnacle. I always knew you were destined for extraordinary things, even during those years when your light seemed dimmed. Remember what I told you when you were struggling with your dissertation? Science is not a sprint, but a marathon. And the most important quality is not raw intelligence, but persistence. You've proven that truth beyond anything I could have imagined. Your journey will inspire countless young women in science to persist through their own challenges. Her message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Helen had been the one person who had continued to see my potential even during the years when I had nearly lost sight of it myself. She had gently questioned my reduced hours when I first scaled back, not from judgment, but from genuine concern about the trajectory I was choosing. Are you certain this is what you want, Eleanor? She had asked over coffee shortly after Sophie's birth. Or is it what James wants for you? I had defended my choices then, explaining the practical family considerations. But Helen's question had planted a seed of awareness that had lain dormant for years before finally germinating in the aftermath of my divorce. I penned a heartfelt reply, thanking her for being the voice of my authentic self during years when I had muffled that voice for the sake of family harmony. Your mentorship sustained me even when I wasn't consciously aware of it, I wrote. The questions you asked years ago eventually helped me find my way back to the path I was meant to follow. On my first official day as CEO, I arrived at Pinnacle's headquarters in San Francisco at 6:30 a.m., intentionally early to center myself before the formal introductions. The executive floor was quiet, dawn light casting long shadows across the minimalist reception area with its prominent display of the company's groundbreaking medical devices and treatment protocols. I stood before the wall of innovation, studying each breakthrough that had established Pinnacle's reputation. Behind each product was a story of scientific persistence, of researchers who had continued believing in possibilities when early results disappointed. Their dedication resonated deeply with my own journey. They're impressive, aren't they? I turned to find Raymond Chen, Pinnacle's chairman, observing me from the doorway. In his 70s now, Raymond had founded the company 3 decades earlier after a distinguished research career. The products are impressive, I agreed. But I was actually thinking about the scientists behind them, the persistence required to bring these innovations to patients. Raymond smiled, pleased by my perspective. That's exactly why the board selected you, Eleanor. You understand that behind every data point is a human story, both of the researchers and the patients they serve. He gestured toward his office. Do you have a moment before the executive team arrives? There's something I'd like to share with you. In his office, Raymond retrieved a folder from his desk. The board's decision to appoint you was unanimous, but I want you to know it wasn't merely your scientific credentials or business acumen that convinced us. He handed me the folder. These were the deciding factors. Inside was a collection of letters from researchers I had mentored throughout my career, junior scientists from Meridian, postdoctoral fellows I had supervised, even students from guest lectures I had delivered. Each described how my guidance had influenced their approach to science and their professional development. Leadership isn't just about strategic vision or operational excellence, Raymond said quietly. It's about nurturing the potential in others, even when circumstances aren't nurturing your own. You've been doing that your entire career, Eleanor, sometimes from positions of limited authority. Imagine what you'll accomplish from this platform. His words struck a profound chord. Throughout my years of scaled-back ambition, I had indeed continued mentoring others, particularly young women navigating the challenges of science careers. I had never considered this ongoing contribution as leadership preparation, yet Raymond and the board clearly saw it differently. As the executive team gathered for my first official meeting as CEO, I carried this new perspective with me. Looking around the conference table at the diverse faces of Pinnacle's leadership, some curious, some cautiously optimistic, a few perhaps apprehensive about an outsider taking the helm, I recognized an opportunity to establish not just my authority, but my vision. Pinnacle has transformed medicine through technological innovation, I began. But our next frontier isn't just developing new treatments. It's transforming how we integrate scientific discovery with patient access. The most brilliant breakthrough means nothing if it remains locked in our laboratories or priced beyond reach of those who need it most. As I outlined my vision for Pinnacle's evolution, I noticed the shifting expressions around the table: engagement replacing uncertainty, excitement overcoming reservation. By meeting's end, even the most skeptical executives were leaning forward, contributing ideas for implementing this integrated approach. Later that afternoon, as I settled into my new office overlooking San Francisco Bay, my assistant announced, "An unexpected visitor, Dr. Vivian Chen, my former colleague from Meridian who had encouraged me to apply for the research director position that had begun my professional resurrection." "Vivian!" I exclaimed, embracing her. "What on earth are you doing in San Francisco?" She smiled mysteriously. "Considering an opportunity. Rumor has it Pinnacle's new CEO is building an integrated research and development division that aligns scientific innovation with market implementation. Sounds exactly like the approach we discussed years ago at Meridian." I stared at her in delighted shock. "Are you saying you'd consider leaving Meridian? You've built your entire career there." "So had you," she pointed out, "until you realized your potential extended beyond those walls." She settled into a chair across from my desk. "Besides, I've always believed in backing visionaries. When you were passed over for promotions at Meridian despite your brilliant contributions, I knew they were underestimating what you could become. I don't intend to make the same mistake. That evening, alone in my hotel suite, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment. From the young researcher who had compromised her ambitions for family harmony, to the divorced mother rebuilding her career step by meticulous step, to the industry leader now positioned to transform how scientific innovation reached patients, each phase had been essential to developing my unique perspective. James and Natasha had inadvertently given me a precious gift through their dismissal of my potential. They had freed me to discover capabilities I might never have explored had I remained in the comfortable constraint of our marriage. Their underestimation had become my motivation, not for revenge, but for self-discovery. My phone chimed with a text message from Sophie. "First day as CEO. How does it feel to be the boss lady? Ethan and I are so proud we're practically strutting around Boston." I smiled, typing back, exciting, challenging, and surprisingly comfortable. Turns out all those years of managing family logistics while conducting research prepared me perfectly for executive leadership. Sophie's response came quickly. "Obviously, you were CEO of the Morgan family long before Pinnacle figured out your superpowers. Love you, Mom." Her words captured a truth I had only recently come to appreciate. The skills I had developed during my years of scaled-back professional ambition, mediating conflicts, optimizing limited resources, translating complex concepts. For different audiences, maintaining strategic focus amid constant interruptions were precisely the capabilities that distinguished effective executive leadership. What I had once viewed as career limitations had actually been leadership preparation of the most practical kind. The challenge now was applying these hard-won insights at an organizational scale, transforming Pinnacle from merely a successful biotech company into a pioneering force for integrated healthcare innovation. As I prepared for bed, my phone rang one final time. The screen displayed James Morgan, my ex-husband's first call since our brief interaction at Sophie's graduation. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity prevailed. "Eleanor," he began, his tone carefully modulated. "I hope I'm not calling too late." "I'm still adjusting to Pacific time," I replied neutrally. "What can I help you with, James?" He cleared his throat. "I wanted to congratulate you properly on your first day as CEO. It's an extraordinary achievement." The sincerity in his voice seemed genuine, which surprised me. "Thank you. That's kind of you to say." "It's more than kindness," he continued. "It's recognition. I may not have fully appreciated your capabilities during our marriage." The understatement was so profound it almost made me laugh. Almost. "That's generous of you to acknowledge," I said carefully. "Natasha mentioned she reached out to you about Helix's partnership with Pinnacle," he added, shifting to what I suspected was the real purpose of his call. "She did." "And you directed her to formal channels." "That's correct." A pause followed, during which I could almost hear him recalibrating his approach. The James I had been married to had always believed personal connections could override formal processes, that the real decisions happened over drinks or dinner, not in official meetings. "I respect that," he said finally. "Professional boundaries are important, but I hope our history doesn't negatively influence Pinnacle's assessment of Helix's contributions. The marketing partnership has been beneficial for both companies. Pinnacle evaluates all partnerships based on measurable outcomes and strategic alignment," I explained. "Personal history, positive or negative, won't factor into those assessments." Another pause. "You've changed, Ellie." The observation was stated without judgment, simply as fact. And he was right. The woman who had once accommodated his every professional priority at the expense of her own had indeed undergone a profound transformation. "I've become more fully myself, James," I corrected gently. "That's different from changing." After we disconnected, I stood at my hotel window overlooking the San Francisco skyline, city lights glimmering against the darkness of the bay. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, executive decisions, strategic pivots, organizational alignments. But tonight, I savored the quiet certainty that I had finally stepped fully into the potential that had always existed within me, waiting patiently to be claimed. The journey hadn't been linear or easy. There had been moments of doubt so profound I had nearly retreated to the safety of limited expectations. But persistence, that quality my graduate advisor had valued above raw intelligence, had ultimately revealed capacities I might never have discovered without the catalyst of personal disappointment. In that moment, I made a silent commitment not just to lead Pinnacle effectively, but to create pathways for others whose potential remained partially expressed due to circumstance or constraint. My experience had taught me that latent capability often awaits only recognition and opportunity to flourish. The true measure of my success as CEO would not be stock performance or product launches, but how many others discovered their full capacity under my leadership. That would be a vindication far more meaningful than any moment of recognition at a graduation ceremony or corporate announcement. With that clarity of purpose, I finally turned away from the window and prepared for my first full day as Chief Executive Officer of Pinnacle Innovations, no longer defined by what I had lost or overcome, but by what I now stood poised to create. My first 100 days as Pinnacle's CEO unfolded with the intensity of a scientific breakthrough, exhilarating, demanding, and transformative. Each morning began before dawn with international calls to our European operations, followed by executive meetings, research reviews, and investor briefings that often extended well into the evening. The learning curve was vertiginous, but I discovered that my years of scientific training had prepared me perfectly for absorbing complex information and making decisions based on incomplete data. "You're adapting remarkably quickly," observed Regina Santos, Pinnacle's veteran chief financial officer, during our third weekly review. "Most new CEOs take months to develop the command you've shown in weeks." I appreciated her candor. Regina had been at Pinnacle for 15 years and had seen 2 previous leadership transitions. Her approval wasn't easily earned. "Scientific research teaches you to identify patterns in complexity," I explained. "The variables are different in business, but the analytical approach is similar." What I didn't add was how my years as a single mother juggling career rebuilding with parenting had honed my ability to make effective decisions under pressure. When you've navigated teenage crises while finalizing research protocols and completing business school assignments, corporate emergencies maintain their proper perspective. By the end of my second month, I had implemented significant structural changes at Pinnacle. The most substantial was creating integrated development teams that brought together scientists, market analysts, manufacturing experts, and patient advocates from the earliest stages of product development. This approach, which I'd outlined in my Harvard Business Review article, represented a departure from the traditional sequential process where treatments were developed in isolation before commercial considerations were addressed. The transition wasn't without resistance. Several senior executives who had thrived under the previous siloed structure questioned whether scientists could effectively collaborate with marketing teams without compromising research integrity. "Researchers need the freedom to explore without commercial constraints," argued Dr. Marcus Thompson, our veteran research director, during a particularly tense leadership meeting. "This integrated approach risks stifling innovation." Rather than dismissing his concerns, I invited Marcus to join me for a visit to our Boston research facility. As we toured the laboratories, I introduced him to Ava Patel, a brilliant young immunologist whose experimental treatment for lupus nephritis had initially been deprioritized under the previous development model. "The data was promising," Ava explained, pulling up her research on a laboratory monitor. but the market analysis suggested limited commercial potential because the condition affects relatively few patients. So what changed? Marcus asked, studying the robust clinical trial now underway. Dr. Morgan authorized a pilot of the integrated development approach, Ava replied. When our patient advocates joined the conversation, they helped us recognize that while the patient population is small, the treatment could command premium pricing due to its dramatic efficacy and the absence of alternatives. The commercial team identified a pathway to profitability despite the limited market size. As we left the laboratory, Marcus was thoughtful. The treatment might never have reached patients under our traditional model. Exactly, I confirmed. Integration doesn't compromise scientific integrity. It ensures breakthrough science actually reaches those who need it. By the end of our visit, Marcus had transitioned from skeptic to advocate. His endorsement accelerated acceptance of the new approach throughout Pinnacle's research divisions. This pattern repeated across various initiatives, initial resistance giving way to enthusiasm as teams experienced the benefits of the integrated approach firsthand. By my 100th day as CEO, Pinnacle's development pipeline had been reprioritized based on a sophisticated matrix of scientific promise, patient need, and commercial viability. The results were beginning to materialize in measurable outcomes. Our stock price had increased 18% since my appointment, and analysts were publishing increasingly positive assessments of Pinnacle's strategic direction. Morgan brings unique perspective to Pinnacle leadership, wrote one influential healthcare analyst. Her scientific credentials earn respect from research teams, while her business training enables meaningful dialogue with investors. This rare combination positions Pinnacle to bridge the historical divide between biomedical innovation and commercial implementation. While professional validation was gratifying, the most meaningful feedback came from unexpected sources. 1. Evening. As I worked late in my San Francisco office, I received an email from a researcher at our Philadelphia laboratory, someone I had never met personally. Dr. Morgan, she wrote, I'm a junior immunologist who nearly left Pinnacle last year due to frustration with how promising treatments for rare diseases were consistently deprioritized. Your integrated development approach has transformed our work. Last week, my research on an ultra-rare genetic disorder was approved for accelerated development because our patient advocates helped quantify the life-changing impact, even though the market is small. For the first time in my career, I feel the full alignment of my scientific ambition with my company's priorities. Thank you for making Pinnacle a place where meaningful science thrives. Messages like these confirmed that the professional reformation I had experienced personally could indeed be scaled to organizational transformation. The principles that had guided my own career rebuilding, integrating apparently conflicting priorities, recognizing value beyond conventional metrics, persisting through initial skepticism, were equally effective when applied to corporate strategy. As my leadership approach gained traction internally, I began receiving invitations to share Pinnacle's transformation with external audiences. The most significant came from Harvard Business School, which asked me to deliver a keynote address at their annual healthcare conference, an event attended by industry leaders, investors, and policymakers. The invitation was professionally flattering, but it also meant returning to Boston, where I would inevitably encounter James and Natasha in professional circles. While I had maintained civil communication regarding the children, our business interactions had been minimal since I declined Natasha's lunch invitation. Ethan, now in his final year of high school, was delighted by the prospect of my visit. Perfect timing, Mom. You can help me finalize my college applications while you're here. Sophie, who had begun a research position at a biotech startup, focused on treatment accessibility, was equally enthusiastic. The founder wants to meet you while you're in town. Your integrated development model is exactly what she's been advocating. I arrived in Boston on a crisp October afternoon, autumn, colors painting the city in brilliant reds and golds. After checking into my hotel, I visited Sophie at her small apartment near Kendall Square. the vibrant biotech hub adjacent to MIT, where I had once imagined building my own career before marriage, and motherhood redirected my path. "Welcome to my humble abode," Sophie grinned, embracing me at the door. Her apartment was tiny but organized with scientific precision, bookshelves categorized by subject, kitchen implements arranged for optimal workflow. "It's perfect," I assured her, recognizing the focused determination that mirrored my own at her age. "How's the startup experience?" Sophie's face lit with enthusiasm as she described her work developing accessible treatment delivery systems for underserved communities. "We're creating auto-injectors that cost 1/10 of current options without compromising safety or efficacy. It's exactly the kind of challenge I want to tackle, where scientific innovation directly addresses healthcare disparities." As she spoke, I recognized that Sophie had absorbed the most important lessons from both her father and me: James's entrepreneurial instinct and my commitment to meaningful scientific impact, while avoiding our respective blind spots. She understood intrinsically that commercial success and social benefit could be mutually reinforcing rather than competing priorities. "I'm so proud of you," I told her, meaning it more deeply than words could express. "You found your purpose, at an age when most people are still discovering who they are." She smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "Speaking of discovering who you are, guess who's attending the Harvard Healthcare Conference tomorrow?" My stomach tightened slightly. "Your father and Natasha?" "Helix is a major sponsor," Sophie confirmed. "Dad texted asking if I knew whether you'd be attending. I didn't respond yet." I appreciated her discretion. "It's fine. I expected we might cross paths professionally now that I'm more visible in the industry." Sophie studied me with her perceptive gaze. "Are you nervous about seeing them in this context? With you as the keynote speaker rather than the supportive spouse or ex-wife?" The question was insightful. Despite my professional confidence, there remained a vestigial vulnerability about appearing in this new role before the man who had consistently underestimated me and the woman who had benefited from that underestimation. "A little," I admitted. "Not about the presentation itself, but about the shift in dynamic. It's one thing to know intellectually that I've moved beyond their perception of me. It's another to physically embody that evolution in their presence." Sophie squeezed my hand.
"Just remember that everyone else in that room will see you as the brilliant Dr. Eleanor Morgan, CEO of Pinnacle Innovations. Their outdated perception is their limitation, not yours." Her words stayed with me that evening as I finalized my keynote.
Presentation in my hotel room. I had titled it, "Integration as Innovation: Bridging the Divide Between Scientific Breakthrough and Patient Impact," focusing on how Pinnacle's structural changes were accelerating treatment delivery without compromising research quality. The following morning, I dressed with particular care in a tailored navy suit that projected both authority and approachability. As I fastened my grandmother's pearl earrings, a talisman I wore for significant professional moments, I reminded myself that I had earned this platform through demonstrated capability, not political maneuvering or personal connections. Harvard Business School's Spangler Auditorium was filled to capacity when I arrived. The conference organizer, Professor Diane Williams, greeted me warmly. "We've had record registration this year," she confided. "Your keynote was a significant draw." "The industry is fascinated by Pinnacle's transformation under your leadership." As we chatted, I scanned the audience gathering in the auditorium. In the third row, I spotted James and Natasha, heads bent in conversation. James wore the confident expression I remembered from countless business functions during our marriage, the look of someone comfortable in exclusive professional environments. Natasha, elegant in a designer suit, surveyed the room with calculated awareness, noting who was present and their relative importance. Neither had noticed me yet, giving me a moment to observe them as strangers might. A successful investment executive and his marketing officer wife, perfectly calibrated to project corporate prosperity and connection, There was nothing objectively wrong with their careful image cultivation. What had been wrong was expecting me to remain permanently in the supporting role of that narrative. Professor Williams led me to a small waiting area adjacent to the stage. "We'll begin in about 10 minutes. The university president would like to introduce you personally. He's quite impressed with your unique career trajectory." Left alone. To review my notes, I experienced a moment of profound gratitude for the path that had led me here. Had my marriage remained intact, I might never have discovered my capacity for executive leadership or the satisfaction of aligning scientific innovation with patient impact at an organizational scale. The painful dissolution of one dream had ultimately enabled the fulfillment of another, more aligned with my true capabilities. When Professor Williams returned to escort me to the stage, I felt centered in a way that transcended mere professional confidence. This was the serenity of authentic alignment, of doing work that perfectly matched my abilities and values. Harvard's president introduced me with genuine enthusiasm, highlighting both my scientific contributions and the measurable improvements at Pinnacle under my leadership. As I took the podium, the audience applause was robust, including from the unexpected quarter of James and Natasha, who had finally spotted me and were processing this new context for our interaction. "Thank you for that generous introduction," I began. "I'm here today to discuss integration, not just as an organizational strategy, but as a philosophical approach to innovation." For the next 40 minutes, I outlined Pinnacle's transformation, from a traditional pharmaceutical company with siloed functions to an integrated development organization where scientists, commercial teams, manufacturing experts, and patient advocates collaborated from earliest concept stages. I shared specific examples of treatments that had found pathways to development under this model after being sidelined in traditional structures. The greatest scientific breakthrough has zero patient impact if it remains locked in research journals, or proves too costly to manufacture at scale, I emphasized. True innovation requires not just laboratory brilliance, but development wisdom. The capacity to navigate scientific, regulatory, manufacturing, and commercial complexities as an integrated challenge rather than sequential hurdles. Throughout my presentation, I maintained eye contact with various sections of the audience, occasionally including James and Natasha in my scan. Their expressions had evolved from initial surprise to focused attention. James was taking notes, something I had rarely seen him do at presentations during our marriage, unless the speaker was a recognized authority in his field. During the Q&A session following my keynote, a hand raised from the middle section, Natasha's. Professor Williams, moderating the discussion, acknowledged her. "Dr. Morgan," Natasha began, her voice professionally modulated, "you've described an impressive integration of functions at Pinnacle. However, many biotech companies have attempted similar collaborations only to find that scientific and commercial priorities ultimately conflict. How do you resolve these tensions when they inevitably arise?" The question was legitimate and incisive, exactly the challenge I would have expected from someone with Natasha's marketing experience. There was no hint of our personal history in her tone or phrasing. "Excellent question," I replied. "The key lies in establishing shared metrics that transcend traditional departmental boundaries. At Pinnacle, we've developed a comprehensive valuation model that quantifies both patient impact and commercial potential, creating a common language across disciplines. When conflicts arise, this integrated framework provides objective criteria for resolution rather than defaulting to departmental authority or political influence." I proceeded to outline our valuation methodology in detail, noting how it had resolved specific development controversies by revealing value that would have been missed in conventional assessment approaches. Natasha nodded thoughtfully, making notes of her own. For the first time in our long acquaintance, I sensed she was engaging with me purely as a professional peer rather than through the distorting lens of our personal connection. When the session concluded, attendees swarmed the stage with follow-up questions and business cards. By the time I had addressed the most pressing inquiries, James and Natasha had disappeared from the auditorium, presumably to attend other conference sessions. Later that afternoon, following a luncheon with university leadership and industry executives, I presented a more intimate workshop on implementation strategies for integrated development. As participants filed in, I was surprised to see Natasha among them, without James. She selected a seat near the back, maintaining a professional distance. Throughout the workshop, she participated thoughtfully, asking relevant questions about change management and organizational resistance. Not once did she allude to our personal history or attempt to leverage our connection for special attention. When the workshop concluded, participants lingered to continue discussions or exchange contact information. I was engaged with a hospital administrator when I noticed Natasha waiting patiently at the periphery of the group. Once the crowd had thinned, she approached. "Dr. Morgan," she began formally, "your workshop was extremely valuable. Thank you for the concrete implementation strategies." "I'm glad you found it useful," I replied, maintaining the same professional tone. "The transition isn't easy, but the results justify the effort." She hesitated, then continued with unexpected candor. "I've been reconsidering some of my assumptions about marketing's role in treatment development. Your integrated model challenges the conventional wisdom that commercial considerations should remain separate from scientific innovation." Her acknowledgement represented a significant evolution from the woman who had dismissed my perspectives at family gatherings. Whether this change reflected genuine intellectual growth or merely strategic adaptation to my new position remained unclear, but the professional respect was unmistakable. "The integration benefits all functions," I assured her. "Marketing gains earlier input into development decisions, while research teams develop better understanding of real-world implementation challenges." Natasha nodded thoughtfully. "James had to leave for another commitment, but he was impressed by your keynote. We both were." She paused, seeming to weigh her next words carefully. "Your journey from research director to CEO in such a short time frame is remarkable by any standard." The compliment appeared genuine, free from the subtle condescension that had characterized our previous interactions. I acknowledged it with a simple, "Thank you." "I should let you get to your next session," she said, extending her hand. "Perhaps our companies will find opportunities for meaningful collaboration in the future." As we shook hands, I recognized that Natasha was offering a reset of our professional relationship, not friendship or personal reconciliation, but a pragmatic acknowledgement of our new relative positions and the potential for mutually beneficial business interaction. "Pinnacle is always open to strategic partnerships that advance patient care," I replied, accepting the implicit proposal while maintaining appropriate boundaries. That evening, I joined Sophie and Ethan for dinner at their favorite restaurant in Cambridge. As we settled into our table, Sophie leaned forward eagerly. "So, how was it seeing Dad and Natasha in your professional territory?" I considered the question carefully. "Educational," I replied finally. "For all of us, I think." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked, pausing with a breadstick halfway to his mouth. "I realized that I've moved beyond needing their validation, or even their recognition," I explained. "And I think they realized that their perception of me had been limited by the context in which they knew me." "Did they apologize for underestimating you all those years?" Sophie pressed, her protective instinct evident. "No," I smiled, "nor would I have expected them to. People rarely acknowledge such things explicitly. But there was a shift in how they engaged with me, particularly Natasha. She attended my afternoon workshop and participated as a genuine professional peer. Probably trying to get insider information on Pinnacle's strategy, Ethan suggested skeptically. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But that's normal business intelligence gathering, not personal manipulation. The difference matters. Sophie studied me with her perceptive gaze. You seem different, Mom. More. settled somehow. Her observation was astute. The conference experience had indeed crystallized something important. A final release from the lingering effects of having been underestimated for so long. Standing at that podium, recognized as an authority by the very institutions and individuals who had once marginalized my potential, had healed something fundamental. I think I've finally integrated all the parts of myself, I told my children. The scientist, the executive, the mother, the mentor, they're no longer competing identities but complementary aspects of who I am. Ethan nodded sagely. Character development complete. Ready for the sequel. His lighthearted comment made us laugh, but contained genuine insight. The painful journey of the past years, from supportive wife to divorced mother to industry leader, had indeed completed a vital developmental arc. Whatever challenges lay ahead would be faced from this integrated foundation. The remainder of my Boston visit was devoted to family matters, reviewing Ethan's college applications, meeting Sophie's colleagues at her startup, and visiting my aging parents in their retirement community north of the city. These personal connections grounded me amid the professional whirlwind of the conference. On my final evening before returning to San Francisco, I received an unexpected email from James, the first direct communication we'd had since his phone call after my appointment as CEO. "Eleanor," he wrote, "your keynote yesterday was extraordinary, both in content and delivery. Watching you command that stage and field complex questions with such authority was illuminating. It made me realize how thoroughly I failed to recognize your executive potential during our marriage. That failure represents my loss in ways that extend far beyond our divorce. I wish you continued success at Pinnacle and hope we might eventually establish a collegial professional relationship despite our personal history." The message contained no requests or business propositions, just a straightforward acknowledgement of his limited perception and genuine recognition of my accomplishment. After nearly 3 decades of knowing James, this might have been his most honest communication. I drafted a simple reply. "Thank you, James. I appreciate your message and wish you continued success as well. I believe we can indeed maintain professional collegiality while honoring appropriate boundaries." As I prepared for bed that night, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought me to this moment of completion. The painful dissolution of my marriage had ultimately catalyzed a profound reclamation of my professional potential. The woman who had once accommodated herself into near invisibility had emerged as a recognized industry leader, not through dramatic confrontation, but through persistent recommitment to her authentic capabilities. The greatest vindication hadn't been seeing surprise on James's and Natasha's faces at the conference. It had been the quiet certainty I felt addressing that audience, the bone-deep knowledge that I was exactly where I belonged, doing precisely the work I was meant to do. Tomorrow I would return to San Francisco and the complex challenges of leading Pinnacle's continued transformation. But tonight, I savored the sweet certainty that the girl who had once dreamed of changing medicine through scientific innovation had indeed fulfilled that dream, just through a path she could never have anticipated. The journey hadn't been linear or easy. There had been moments of doubt so profound I had nearly retreated to the safety of limited expectations. But persistence, that quality my graduate advisor had valued above raw intelligence, had ultimately revealed capacities I might never have discovered without the catalyst of personal disappointment. As I drifted toward sleep, I felt profound gratitude for the difficult path that had led me here. The painful breaking of one dream had ultimately enabled the fulfillment of another more aligned with my true capabilities. Sometimes I realized, we must lose what we thought we wanted to discover what we truly need. 1 year into my tenure as Pinnacle's CEO, I found myself at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, an elite gathering I had once attended as James's wife, but never imagined joining as a corporate leader in my own right. The alpine setting was breathtaking, snow-capped mountains framing the exclusive conference center where global executives, politicians, and thought leaders converged to discuss humanity's most pressing challenges. Dr. Morgan, your panel on healthcare accessibility begins in 20 minutes. My executive assistant, Michael, reminded me as we navigated the crowded main concourse. The moderator wants to confirm your key talking points. I nodded, mentally reviewing the statistics and case studies I had prepared. My panel, Breaking Barriers, Making Medical Innovation Accessible to All, included the WHO's Director of Essential Medicines, the Health Minister of Rwanda, and the CEO of Europe's largest hospital system. Pinnacle's groundbreaking work in developing affordable delivery systems for complex biologics had earned us a reputation as pioneers in the accessibility space, largely due to initiatives I had championed. As Michael and I approached the preparation room, I glimpsed a familiar figure through the glass wall. Natasha, engaged in animated conversation with the panel moderator. Her presence wasn't entirely surprising. Helix BioVentures had been actively repositioning itself in the accessibility conversation since our encounter at Harvard Business School 6 months earlier. Dr. Morgan, the moderator greeted me warmly as we entered. Perfect timing. I was just discussing the panel structure with Ms. Reynolds from Helix. We've had a last-minute addition to our group. Natasha extended her hand professionally. Eleanor, good to see you again. Likewise, I replied with genuine equanimity. Our interactions since the Harvard conference had been limited but cordial, professional recognition replacing personal tension. Ms. Reynolds will be presenting Helix's new Global Access Initiative, the moderator explained. I believe your companies have complementary approaches to the accessibility challenge. This was news to me. Helix had historically focused on premium markets, with little attention to accessibility for developing regions. Their sudden pivot into this space suggested a strategic realignment, possibly influenced by Pinnacle's success with our integrated development model. We're certainly committed to the same ultimate goal, I responded diplomatically. I look forward to hearing about Helix's new initiative. The panel discussion that followed was substantive and occasionally surprising. The WHO representative outlined crushing disparities in treatment access between wealthy and developing nations. Rwanda's health minister described innovative distribution systems that bypass traditional infrastructure limitations. I presented Pinnacle's integrated development approach that considered accessibility from earliest research stages rather than as an afterthought. When Natasha's turn came, she unveiled Helix's new program with polished precision. The Global Access Initiative represents a fundamental shift in how Helix approaches treatment development, she explained. We've created dedicated research teams focused exclusively on adaptations that make our premium therapies viable in resource-limited settings. As she elaborated, I recognized unmistakable elements of Pinnacle's integrated model, the cross-functional teams, the early-stage consideration of manufacturing constraints, the partnership with patient advocates from target communities. Helix had essentially adopted our approach while rebranding it as their own innovation. My initial reaction was a flash of indignation. This was clearly derivative of the model I had pioneered and presented at Harvard. But as Natasha continued, highlighting specific adaptations Helix had implemented, I recognized something more, nuanced occurring. They hadn't simply copied our approach. They had studied it, understood its principles, and thoughtfully applied it to their unique portfolio and organizational structure. During the Q&A session, an audience member directed a pointed question to both of us. Dr. Morgan and Ms. Reynolds, your approaches seem remarkably similar. How do Pinnacle and Helix differentiate their accessibility strategies in what appears to be an emerging competitive space? The question created a perfect opening for corporate posturing or subtle criticism. A year earlier, I might have used the opportunity to emphasize Pinnacle's pioneering role or highlight the recency of Helix's commitment to accessibility. Instead, I found myself considering a different response. May I address this first? I asked Natasha, who nodded with professional courtesy. The accessibility challenge is too vast for proprietary approaches, I began. When effective models emerge, their rapid adoption and adaptation across the industry should be celebrated, not constrained by competitive concerns. Pinnacle developed our integrated approach based on my research background and personal conviction that scientific innovation fails if it doesn't reach patients. Helix has clearly embraced similar principles while adapting them to their unique portfolio. The real differentiation isn't between our strategies, but between companies committed to accessibility and those still prioritizing only premium markets. My response seemed to surprise Natasha, who studied me thoughtfully before adding, "I agree completely with Dr. Morgan. Helix has learned valuable lessons from Pinnacle's pioneering work while contributing our own expertise in market segmentation and tiered access programs. The goal isn't differentiation, but acceleration. How quickly can we collectively transform the accessibility landscape?" As the panel concluded, several audience members approached with follow-up questions and business cards. The WHO representative pulled me aside with particular enthusiasm. "That exchange between you and Ms. Reynolds was remarkable," she observed. "Usually, when I moderate industry panels, executives can barely acknowledge competitors' existence, let alone their contributions. Your collaborative framing elevated the entire discussion." I smiled, realizing that my perspective had evolved substantially over the past year. The patients waiting for treatment don't care about corporate rivalries. They just need innovative medicine at prices they can afford. Later that evening, at the forum's networking reception, I found myself at the same cocktail table as Natasha. For a moment, we stood in slightly awkward silence, two professional women with a complicated personal history navigating an unexpected moment of professional alignment. "Your panel comments were generous," she said finally. "Many executives would have emphasized Pinnacle's precedence in the accessibility space. Would that have helped a single patient access needed treatment?" I asked simply. She considered this, then shook her head. "No, but it might have helped Pinnacle's competitive positioning." "Perhaps in the short term," I acknowledged. "But I've learned that the most sustainable advantage comes from continuous innovation, not defending credit for past breakthroughs." Natasha studied me with newfound respect. "That's an unusually evolved perspective for someone in your position." "Experience has been an effective teacher," I replied, "both professional and personal." A flicker of self-awareness crossed her expression. "I imagine so." Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of pharmaceutical executives eager to discuss partnership opportunities with Pinnacle. As I engaged with them, Natasha excused herself gracefully. Watching her disappear into the crowd, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this moment of professional détente. The following morning, I was scheduled to meet with Pinnacle's European leadership team at our Geneva offices. As I left my hotel, a text message arrived from Sophie. "Mom, just saw the live stream of your Davos panel. You and Natasha on the same stage without bloodshed. Very mature. Also, loved your point about collaborative approaches. Call me when you can." Her lighthearted message made me smile. At 23, Sophie had developed a remarkably balanced perspective on the complicated dynamics between her parents and Natasha. Rather than taking sides, she had focused on building her own path, recently accepting a research position with a nonprofit developing treatments for neglected tropical diseases. The Geneva meetings consumed my day with detailed reviews of European clinical trials and regulatory submissions. By early evening, I was mentally exhausted, but satisfied with the alignment between our European operations and global strategy. As I prepared to return to my hotel, my executive assistant notified me of a last-minute dinner invitation. "James Morgan has requested to meet this evening if your schedule permits," Michael informed me. "He's in Geneva for investor meetings and suggests Le Fleur at 8 o'clock. The invitation was unexpected. Though our professional interactions had improved since the Harvard conference, we had maintained a respectful distance, communicating primarily about the children or through intermediaries on business matters. After brief consideration, I accepted. Whatever James wanted to discuss, avoiding the conversation would only create unnecessary tension. "Please confirm the reservation," I instructed Michael. "And arrange transportation for 8:30. I'd like some time to prepare first." Le Fleur was precisely the type of restaurant James had always preferred. Elegant, without ostentation, with impeccable service and a wine list that impressed sophisticated clients. As the maitre d' led me to our table, I spotted James already, seated, reviewing a leather-bound menu with familiar concentration. He stood as I approached, his greeting warmer than I had anticipated. "Eleanor, thank you for making time on short notice. You look well. Pinnacle's leadership clearly agrees with you." "Thank you, James. The role has been both challenging and rewarding." I settled into my chair, studying him with objective eyes. At 53, he remained handsome in the distinguished manner that aging bestowed on certain men, silver threading his dark hair at the temples. His bespoke suit and handcrafted Italian shoes subtly communicated the financial success he had, always prioritized. After ordering drinks and appetizers, James addressed the purpose of his invitation. "I wanted to discuss something that might surprise you," he began. "Helix is considering a strategic partnership with Pinnacle on accessibility initiatives in developing markets." This was indeed unexpected. Despite Natasha's recent pivot toward accessibility, Helix and Pinnacle remained competitors across multiple therapeutic areas. "That's an interesting proposition," I replied carefully. "What prompted this consideration?" James smiled slightly. "Several factors. Natasha was impressed by your Davos panel discussion, particularly your willingness to acknowledge complementary approaches rather than emphasizing competitive positioning. More fundamentally, we've recognized that Pinnacle's integrated development model and Helix's market segmentation expertise could create synergies in addressing underserved markets." His explanation was logical and businesslike, focused on strategic alignment rather than our personal history. Yet I sensed something beneath the corporate reasoning, a subtle shift in how James perceived both me and himself. "The potential synergies are worth exploring," I acknowledged. "Though any formal partnership would require thorough evaluation by both companies' strategic development teams." "Of course," James agreed. "I'm not suggesting we circumvent proper channels, but leadership alignment on vision and principles can accelerate the formal processes." As our conversation continued through dinner, I noticed a subtle but significant change in James's interaction style. During our marriage and the early post-divorce years, he had consistently positioned himself as the business authority, explaining market dynamics and corporate strategy as if translating complex concepts for a novice. Now he engaged as a genuine peer, soliciting my perspectives on industry trends and regulatory challenges with authentic interest. The shift was neither dramatic nor explicitly acknowledged, but it represented a profound evolution in our dynamic, one that reflected not just my professional advancement, but James's growing recognition of capabilities he had previously overlooked or dismissed. Over dessert, our conversation shifted to personal matters. Sophie's research fellowship, Ethan's adjustment to his freshman year at Stanford, James's recent medical scare that had prompted lifestyle changes. "The cardiac event was minor," he explained, declining the after-dinner cognac he would have automatically ordered in earlier years. "But it created what my doctor calls a teachable moment. I've actually started swimming again. Remember how I used to compete in college?" I nodded, recalling the swimming trophies that had once occupied a prominent place in his study. "You were quite dedicated until work took precedence." "That's been the pattern with many things in my life," he acknowledged, an unusual note of reflection in his voice. "Allowing immediate professional priorities to overshadow other values and relationships." The observation hung between us, carrying implications beyond his abandoned athletic pursuits. For the first time since our divorce, James seemed to be approaching genuine insight about the choices that had shaped our marriage and its dissolution. Rather than pursuing this delicate territory, I steered the conversation towards safer ground. How is Natasha adjusting to Helix's new strategic direction? The accessibility initiative represents a significant departure from her previous marketing approach. Challenging but energizing, James replied. Actually, your Harvard presentation was quite influential in her thinking. She would never admit this directly, but she studied the video recording multiple times, analyzing your integration model and exploring how similar principles might apply at Helix. This confirmation of my influence on Helix's strategy might once have felt vindicating. Now it simply represented the natural diffusion of effective approaches across an industry, exactly the collaborative advancement I had advocated during the Davos panel. The model is adaptable across different organizational structures, I noted. I'm glad Helix has found value in the core principles. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, James hesitated before making a final observation. You know, Eleanor, watching you emerge as an industry leader has been educational in ways I never anticipated. The capabilities you've demonstrated at Pinnacle were always present. I just failed to recognize them within the constraints of how I defined our relationship. The acknowledgement was more direct than anything he had previously offered, a clear admission that his perception, not my potential, had been limited during our marriage. We all have blind spots in how we see others, I replied generously, particularly those closest to us. James shook his head slightly. That's characteristically gracious, but not entirely accurate. My blind spots regarding your capabilities weren't accidental oversight, but convenient alignment with my own narrative. I wanted to be the business visionary in our relationship, which required casting you primarily as the scientific specialist. This level of self-awareness represented significant personal growth, the kind that often emerges only after disruptive life events create space for genuine reflection. Thank you for that recognition, I said simply. It matters, even years later. Outside the restaurant, as we waited for our respective cars, James asked an unexpected question. Are you happy, Eleanor? Not just professionally successful, but genuinely fulfilled? The query was striking in its departure from his usual focus on measurable achievements and external validation. I considered my response carefully, wanting to offer authentic insight rather than facile reassurance. I am, I confirmed. Not in the simplistic way we often envision happiness, perpetual contentment, or absence of challenge. But I experience deep fulfillment from leading work that perfectly aligns with my values and capabilities. That alignment creates a foundation of purpose that sustains me through inevitable difficulties. James nodded thoughtfully. That's what I've observed from a distance. Not just success, but congruence. As if you've finally found your natural element after swimming against the current for many years. His metaphor was surprisingly apt. And you? I asked, genuine curiosity replacing old resentments. Has your path brought similar fulfillment? His hesitation revealed more than immediate words could have expressed. I've achieved the external markers I pursued, he said finally. But I'm still working on the congruence you described, the alignment between achievement and meaningful purpose. Before I could respond, his car arrived, ending our conversation at this moment of unexpected candor. As we exchanged professional goodbyes, I realized that our dinner had represented something important. Not reconciliation or friendship, but mutual recognition of each other's authentic evolution beyond the limitations of our shared past. The next morning, as my flight departed Geneva for San Francisco, I found myself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past 18 months. From research director to CEO, from underestimated ex-wife to recognized industry leader, from accommodating supporter to confident visionary, each transition had built upon the last, creating an integrated professional identity that would have been unimaginable during my marriage. Midway through the flight, I opened my laptop to review quarterly projections for Pinnacle's research pipeline. Our integrated development approach had accelerated several promising treatments through early clinical phases, particularly in autoimmune conditions and rare genetic disorders, areas often neglected by traditional pharmaceutical companies due to limited market size. As I studied the data, an incoming email notification appeared, a message from Dr. Helen Martinez, my former graduate advisor who had recently celebrated her 80th birthday. The subject line read simply, "Full circle." "Eleanor," she wrote, "I've just finished reading your profile in Nature Biotechnology about Pinnacle's transformation under your leadership. The article mentioned your upcoming commencement address at MIT, where you'll be receiving an honorary doctorate for your contributions to both scientific innovation and accessibility advocacy. This news filled me with a particular kind of joy that perhaps only a mentor can fully appreciate. The profound satisfaction of watching a former student not merely succeed, but transcend conventional measures of achievement to create something truly meaningful. Do you remember our conversation when you were considering scaling back your research to support James's career advancement? I asked whether this was truly your choice, or simply the path of least resistance. You assured me then that it was a strategic decision for your family's benefit. Perhaps it was, for that season of your life. But I always sensed a temporary divergence rather than permanent alignment with your deepest capabilities. What strikes me most about your journey isn't the prestigious title or corporate influence, impressive though they are. It's the integration you've achieved between scientific rigor and human compassion, between innovative thinking and practical implementation. You've created a model that values both breakthrough discovery and equitable access, a synthesis many considered impossible within traditional pharmaceutical structures. When you stand at the MIT podium next month, you'll address graduates embarking on their own professional journeys. Some will face challenges similar to those you encountered, expectations to diminish their ambitions for others' comfort, pressure to choose between meaningful work and personal fulfillment, moments when their potential remains unseen by those closest to them. Your presence on that stage, your very life trajectory, offers them a powerful alternative narrative, one where temporary compromises need not become permanent limitations, where delayed dreams can ultimately find more significant fulfillment through the wisdom gained in waiting. I am immensely proud of the scientist you have always been. I am equally proud of the leader you have become. But I am most proud of the integration you have achieved between these aspects of yourself, creating wholeness from what others might have experienced as irreconcilable fragments. With deepest admiration, Helen. Her message brought unexpected tears to my eyes, recognition from the mentor who had always seen my fullest potential, even when I had temporarily lost sight of it myself. Helen had never criticized my choices, even when she questioned their alignment with my capabilities. She had simply maintained a consistent vision of what I might become if circumstances aligned with my authentic gifts. As my flight continued across the Atlantic, I began drafting notes for my MIT commencement address. Beyond sharing Pinnacle's business transformation or my own career trajectory, I wanted to offer these brilliant young graduates something more fundamentally valuable: permission to evolve beyond others' limited perceptions and their own provisional compromises. 2 weeks later, I stood at the MIT podium facing thousands of graduates in their academic regalia, their expressions reflecting the particular mixture of accomplishment and uncertainty that characterizes transition moments. Among the faculty, seated behind me was Helen Martinez, specially invited to witness this culmination of the journey she had supported from its beginning. Distinguished faculty, honored guests, and class of 2025, I began. When I sat where you sit now, receiving my PhD in biochemistry, I believed I understood my professional path with reasonable clarity. I would conduct groundbreaking research, develop innovative treatments, perhaps eventually lead a scientific team. My identity was firmly anchored in laboratory discovery. What I could not have anticipated was how completely that identity would be challenged, fragmented, and ultimately reconstructed through circumstances both chosen and imposed. The linear career progression I envisioned would instead become a winding path through unexpected terrain, some stretches difficult, but ultimately revelatory. Today, I want to speak not about Pinnacle's corporate transformation or the integrated development model that has accelerated treatment delivery to patients. Those achievements matter deeply, but they represent outcomes rather than insights. Instead, I want to share what I've learned about potential, how it persists even when temporarily diverted, how it often requires disruptive circumstances to find its fullest expression, and how its eventual manifestation may bear little resemblance to our initial conception. Many of you will face moments when your capabilities exceed your circumstances, when the full expression of your potential seems constrained by relationships, responsibilities, or others' limited perception of who you are and what you might become. In those moments, remember that genuine potential is neither fragile nor perishable. It endures through seasons of apparent dormancy, gathering insights and perspectives that will ultimately enrich its expression. My own journey from research scientist to corporate executive included a detour through divorce and single parenthood that initially appeared to further constrain my professional options. Only in retrospect did I recognize how these challenging circumstances created space for capabilities to emerge that might otherwise have remained undeveloped. Leadership skills, strategic thinking, cross-functional integration, capacities. Essential to my current role but invisible within my original career conception. The most valuable insight from this unexpected trajectory isn't about resilience or perseverance, though both qualities matter enormously. It's about integration, the capacity to incorporate seemingly contradictory experiences into a more comprehensive understanding of your potential than was previously possible. The scientist I was at graduation needed to encounter limitations to discover the leader I could become. The research skills I developed in laboratories proved unexpectedly applicable to organizational transformation. The parenting challenges I navigated as a single mother developed executive capabilities I never sought to acquire. None of these connections were apparent while I was experiencing them. Integration emerged retrospectively, revealing pattern and purpose in what had felt like disconnected struggles or temporary compromises. As you leave MIT today, you carry exceptional technical knowledge and analytical capabilities. But your greatest asset isn't what you've already learned. It's your capacity to integrate future experiences, even difficult ones, into an evolving understanding of your unique contribution. Some of you will follow linear professional paths aligned with your current aspirations. Others will encounter diversions that initially appear to delay or diminish your potential. When those moments arrive, remember that genuine capability isn't diminished by temporary constraints. It continues developing, often in ways invisible to others and even to yourself, until circumstances align for its fullest expression. The world doesn't just need your current knowledge. It needs the integrated perspective you will develop through your unique journey, especially through the challenges that may temporarily divert you from your expected path. Whatever unexpected turns your journey takes, trust that nothing valuable is wasted. No insight, struggle, or apparent detour is irrelevant to your ultimate contribution. The integration of all these experiences, the synthesis of knowledge gained through both achievement and disappointment, will ultimately define your most meaningful impact. Congratulations, class of 2025. I look forward to witnessing the extraordinary contributions your integrated journeys will create. As I concluded my address, the audience rose in sustained applause. But the response that mattered most was Helen's approving nod from the faculty section, the recognition of a mentor who had maintained faith in my potential through all its evolutions. Later that evening, at the president's reception, Sophie and Ethan joined me, both having traveled to witness this full-circle moment in my professional journey. As we chatted with faculty members and university officials, I noticed Sophie's attention drawn to a conversation across the room. "Mom," she whispered, "Dad and Natasha just arrived. They're speaking with the Dean of Engineering." Indeed, James and Natasha had entered the reception and were engaged in animated discussion with university leadership. Their presence was unexpected, but not entirely surprising. James had maintained connections with MIT's business school, occasionally delivering guest lectures on biotech investment strategies. "Should we avoid them?" Ethan asked protectively. At 18, he remained more guarded about James and Natasha than his sister, having experienced the divorce during his more vulnerable adolescent years. "Not at all," I assured him. "We're all professionals at a university function. There's no need for awkwardness." Eventually, our paths converged near the refreshment table. James greeted the children warmly, before extending professional congratulations on my honorary doctorate and commencement address. "Your speech was extraordinary, Eleanor," he said with genuine admiration. "Particularly your insights about integration of seemingly disconnected experiences. I've been reflecting on similar themes recently." "Thank you," I replied. "It's a perspective that continues evolving with new experiences." Natasha, elegant as always in a designer dress that subtly communicated affluence without ostentation, offered her own congratulations. The graduates were fortunate to hear such nuanced wisdom rather than typical platitudes about success and ambition. What struck me most about this interaction wasn't the professional courtesy, or even the genuine appreciation they expressed for my address. It was the complete absence of the tension or power dynamics that had characterized our earlier encounters. We were simply four professionals with a complicated shared history, each having evolved beyond the limitations of our former relationships. As James and Natasha moved on to greet other attendees, Sophie leaned close with a perceptive observation. "They're different with you now, especially Natasha. The competitive edge is gone." Success creates space for generosity, I reflected. When you're secure in your own achievements, you can genuinely appreciate others' contributions without feeling diminished by them. "Is that what you've found at Pinnacle?" Ethan asked thoughtfully. "That kind of security?" I considered his question carefully, wanting to offer authentic insight rather than facile wisdom. "Not immediately," I acknowledged. There were moments early in my leadership when I felt compelled to prove my capability through asserting authority or defending territory. But gradually, I recognized that genuine leadership security comes from creating value, not claiming credit, from enabling others' contributions rather than controlling outcomes. Sophie nodded with the wisdom that continued to surprise me in one so young. "That's what made your commencement address so powerful. You weren't showcasing your success story. You were offering a framework for integrating all experiences into meaningful contribution." Her understanding confirmed what I had long suspected, that my children had absorbed the most valuable lessons from both my struggles and successes. They had witnessed a parent reclaim her potential not through dramatic confrontation, but through persistent commitment to authentic capability. That legacy would shape their own responses to future challenges and opportunities. As the evening concluded, we walked together across MIT's iconic campus, the spring air carrying hints of both completion and new beginning. Tomorrow I would return to Pinnacle and the complex challenges of leading pharmaceutical innovation in an evolving healthcare landscape. Sophie would continue her research fellowship developing treatments for neglected tropical diseases. Ethan would prepare for his sophomore year at Stanford, his interest in biomedical ethics beginning to crystallize into a potential career path. Yet, in this moment, crossing the campus where my scientific journey had begun decades earlier, I felt profound gratitude for the winding path that had led me here. Not despite its unexpected turns and painful passages, but because of them. Each, Apparent detour had contributed essential perspective to my ultimate contribution. Each temporary constraint had developed capabilities I wouldn't otherwise have discovered. The journey hadn't been linear or easy. There had been moments of doubt so profound I had nearly retreated to the safety of limited expectations. But persistence, that quality Helen had valued above raw intelligence, had ultimately revealed capacities I might never have discovered without the catalyst of personal disappointment. As we reached the Charles River, lights from Boston's skyline shimmering across its surface, I embraced my children. These remarkable young adults who had witnessed and supported my professional resurrection. They had seen firsthand that potential persists even when temporarily diverted, that genuine capability finds expression when aligned with authentic purpose, and that integration of all experiences, even painful ones, creates the foundation for most meaningful contribution. That legacy of integrated potential was the true culmination of my journey, far more significant than corporate titles or professional recognition. It would shape not just my children's lives, but the lives of countless others they would influence, through their own integrated journeys of discovery, challenge, and ultimately, meaningful contribution. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.